The morning air in Boston bit at Robert Mitchell's face as he stepped out of his town car. The kind of cold that slid into your bones and stayed there, inside the children's hospital. The warmth wasn't much comfort. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile sheen on the polished floors. The faint, rhythmic beeps of heart monitors pulsed from distant rooms, somewhere down the hall. A child coughed a thin, wheezing sound that seemed to echo far too long. Robert's leather shoes clicked evenly on the linoleum, a metronome of composure masking the chaos that churned just beneath the surface. His $1,000 suit was flawless, his silk tie perfectly knotted, the weight of his gold watch familiar on his wrist. Outwardly, nothing about him suggested a man at the edge of his life, but the doctor's words from less than an hour ago clung to him like frost. 1 week, maybe 2. No more treatments, no more experimental drugs with polite promises and sterile hope. The cancer had spread, and it was going to take him, whether he cooperated or not. He told himself the news didn't matter. He had lived well better than most. 58 years of building Mitchell Technologies from the ground up, taking it from a cramped basement startup to a global titan. His name was printed on skyscrapers, etched into donor plaques, embossed on glossy magazine covers. People shook his hand like it meant something, and yet, as he walked past the glass walls of recovery rooms, he realized he had no one to pass any of it to. No wife, no children. He had always told himself he didn't want them, that family life was a risk he wasn't suited for. But the truth, he never admitted, even to himself, was far simpler. He didn't trust himself not to fail them the way his father had failed him. Still, the absence was sharp now, almost physical. He thought of the boardroom meetings already being scheduled in his absence, the whispers of who might replace him. He imagined the division of his estate board members, charities, maybe a few old friends. Everything neatly signed away, as if he had never been here at all. That was the worst. Of it not the dying, but the idea of disappearing without leaving something that mattered beyond a balance sheet. He passed a nurse's station, nodding at someone who recognized him. His presence here was technically about reviewing a hospital donation, a half-hearted visit arranged by his assistant weeks ago. He might have canceled, but now the thought of charity, of doing something concrete, clung to him, perhaps a wing in his name, a research grant, something that might last. The elevator chimed, and a small group of children in gowns wheeled past in a cluster, their fur poles trailing like skeletal shadows. Robert stepped aside automatically, watching their small faces, some pale and tired, some stubbornly bright. The click of his shoes resumed once they were gone, but the sound seemed louder in the silence that followed. His time was almost gone. He just didn't know yet that before it ran out, a 6-year-old girl in a wheelchair would upend everything. He thought he knew about what it meant to leave a legacy, as checked. The squeak of rubber wheels reached him before the sound of voices. Robert slowed, his gaze drifting toward the corner where the pediatric wing hallway narrowed. A nurse in blue scrubs appeared first, pushing a wheelchair small enough that Robert's first thought was too small for someone that still needs one. The girl in the chair had a head full of unruly blonde curls that looked like they'd never submit to a comb. Her eyes huge, startlingly blue, moved with deliberate slowness, studying everything as though cataloging it for later. She wore a plain cotton dress, white with fading pink flowers, her thin legs straight and unmoving under the blanket tucked neatly around her knees. Clutched in her lap was a stuffed rabbit, so threadbare its fur had turned the color of old paper, one button eye missing. She held it like something irreplaceable. "Excuse me, Mr. Mitchell," the nurse said, her voice tainted with the deference people used around wealth. "Let me get Lily out of your way." "No need," Robert replied automatically, stepping aside. He was already half in his head again, weighing the steps of a charitable bequest. Amount, recipient, tax implications. But the girl didn't pass by. She kept looking at him, not with the shy avoidance most children showed around strangers, but with the kind of unblinking appraisal Robert usually associated with boardroom negotiations. "You look important," she said finally. Despite himself, Robert smiled. "Some people think so." The nurse began to push her forward again, but the girl craned her neck back. "Are you rich?" Robert's smile twitched. People rarely asked him that so bluntly anymore these days. They already knew before speaking to him. "Yes," he said. "I'm very rich." The nurse looked mortified. "Lily," but the girl leaned forward slightly. lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, as if letting him in on a dangerous secret. "Oh, good. Then maybe you can tell me where." "Can I buy a dad for a moment?" Robert thought he'd misheard. The word struck him with an almost physical weight. Breaking through the insulation of detachment he wrapped around himself. The nurse's face drained of color. "Lily," she hissed, scandalized. Robert lifted a hand. "It's all right." The girl reached to her side and pulled up a small plastic purse the color of a faded strawberry. She unzipped it with care, tipped it over her lap, and began counting coins into her palm. Quarters, nickels, a few crumpled bills. "I have $16.37. She said seriously, "I've been saving my quarters. Is that enough for a good one?" Robert's knees ached as he bent down until his eyes were level with hers. "Why do you want to buy a dad, Lily?" Her fingers fidgeted with the rabbit's ear. "Because Grandma Martha is getting very tired," she said matter-of-factly. "She says she might have to go to heaven soon, like my mom. I don't want to be alone. And if you want something important, you have to start saving early." In his 58 years, Robert had closed deals worth billions, but he had no response. For that, the silence that followed felt louder than the hum of hospital machinery. Somewhere behind them, a child laughed high, bright, and fleeting. What Robert didn't know was that this single question, asked in a sterile hallway by a girl with $16 and a broken toy, would change the way he spent the last days of his life and lead to a decision that would leave everyone who heard it in stunned disbelief. Robert didn't sleep that night. He tried pouring a second glass of the 15-year scotch he used to savor, sitting in a leather chair by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. Boston lay spread out beneath him, city lights, winking like a net of captured stars. Usually, the view calmed him. Tonight, it only reminded him of the hollow space inside his chest. $16.37. The number kept replaying in his mind, as precise as a stock ticker. But it wasn't the money, it was the tone in her voice when she'd said it. Steady, calculated. A little girl who already knew you had to plan ahead for survival. By morning, he convinced himself it was just a passing moment, the kind of odd encounter life threw at you sometimes. But as he adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror, he caught his own eyes and realized he was lying to himself. He went back to the hospital. The same nurse from yesterday spotted him the moment he stepped into the pediatric wing. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't expect you. I need to see Lily," he said. The nurse hesitated, her hands tightening on the chart she was carrying. "She's in physical therapy right now." "But, Mr. Mitchell, her situation," she stopped herself, glanced around, and lowered her voice. "It's complicated and delicate." He'd heard those words before, usually when lawyers wanted to hide something. "I'm good with complicated," he said flatly, after some coaxing. He learned bits and pieces. Lily's grandmother, Martha Hayes, was her legal guardian. No living parents, mother dead when Lily was a baby, father unknown. Martha was battling congestive heart failure. No close relatives. If Martha passed, Lily would become a ward of the state. Robert felt something tighten in his chest. And it wasn't the cancer. By the time Lily rolled back from therapy, her cheeks were flushed pink from exertion. She spotted him instantly and grinned, the kind of smile that assumed people returned once they'd been invited in. "Hey," she said, "did you find out?" "Find out what?" "Where to buy a dad," she said, as if reminding him of an errand. Robert almost laughed, but the sound stuck in his throat. "I'm still working on it," he said. Lily nodded seriously, as though reassured. "I thought maybe rich people knew secret places for that kind of thing." They talked for a while about her rabbit. His name's Chester. He's had a rough life. About her favorite book, one with a dragon who's afraid of fire. And about how she counted her savings every night just in case prices go up. When Robert finally left, the nurse pulled him aside. "She's been through more than any child should," she said, "and she never asks for toys or candy. Just that one thing." He didn't answer. But as his driver pulled away from the hospital, he found himself giving a new instruction. "Find me an address for Martha Hayes," he said, "and make it fast." What Robert didn't realize was that walking through her front door would be the moment his carefully constructed life began to crumble. Because what he was about to see in that apartment would make $16.37 seem like the smallest number in the world. Snow had begun to fall by the time Robert's driver eased the black sedan into the narrow street. The neighborhood was a maze of sagging porches and cracked sidewalks, the kind of place where salt from last winter still clung in the gutters. Porch lights glowed dimly against the gray sky, but the air held a quiet that felt less like peace and more like exhaustion. "This is it," the driver murmured, stopping in front of a narrow brick building with peeling paint on the doorframe. Robert stepped out, the cold biting at his skin. He paused at the bottom of the concrete steps. Looking up, the building wasn't falling apart, but it had the kind of wear that told you every repair was delayed until it was absolutely necessary. A faded wreath from last Christmas still hung on the door when the door opened. The smell of boiled cabbage and disinfectant hit him first. Grandma Martha stood there thin, pale, and leaning heavily on a wooden cane. Her hair was snow white, pulled back into a bun so tight it made her cheekbones sharper. She wore a faded cardigan buttoned wrong at the top. Her eyes pale gray and sharp took him in at a glance. "You're the man from the hospital," she said, voice like gravel. "What do you want with my Lily?" Robert didn't flinch. To talk. Inside, the apartment was small and warm, but every surface spoke of frugal survival. A single gas heater ticked in the corner, the couch sagged in the middle. An oxygen tank sat beside an armchair, and a row of pill bottles lined the kitchen counter. The wallpaper had begun to curl at the edges. "Sit," Martha said, lowering herself into the armchair with a quiet groan. "Lily's in her room drawing. She'll be in soon. But let's get one thing straight, if you're here to offer charity, we don't take it." "I'm not here for charity," Robert said, though the truth was more complicated. He scanned the room, noting the careful organization, the coin jar on the shelf labeled Lily's Savings. In blocky child handwriting, Martha's gaze narrowed. "Then what?" Robert hesitated. He'd faced hostile investors, courtroom interrogations, and government audits. But something about this woman's stare made him feel like a schoolboy caught lying. Before he could answer, a small voice came from the doorway. "Robert." Lily rolled in, her hair slightly damp, cheeks flushed from the steam of the heater. She clutched Chester the rabbit in one arm and pushed the wheelchair forward with the other. "You found it," she said, as if he'd simply completed a task she'd given him. "The place where you can buy a dad." Martha closed her eyes briefly, her jaw tightening. "Lily," but Robert's gaze stayed on the child. "I'm still working on that," he said, forcing a smile. They spent the next hour in a strange rhythm, Lily chattering about her drawings while Martha coughed quietly into a handkerchief, pretending not to be winded. Robert listened more than he spoke. He noticed the way Lily's room was decorated with handmade things, paper stars hanging from the ceiling, a blanket clearly stitched by hand. He noticed the way Martha's hand lingered on Lily's shoulder each time she passed her chair, as though memorizing the feel of her. When he finally stood to leave, Martha followed him to the door. Her voice was low, steady, and without sentiment. "I'm not asking for your help, Mr. Mitchell, but I know what's coming. I've been to the doctor. When I'm gone, they'll put her in a home. And a child like her." She stopped, looking away. "You don't forget what that does to a kid." Robert said nothing, but something in his expression made her tilt her head, studying him. "You've got the look of a man who's lost something before," she said softly. "Don't wait till long to decide if you're going to do something about it." That night, back in his penthouse, Robert stared at the skyline again. The city hadn't changed, but something in him had shifted. Quiet and dangerous, the numbers in his head weren't stock prices anymore, they were days. His, hers, Martha's, and for the first time, he wondered if the only thing worth buying in his final week might be something no amount of money had ever gotten him before. The pain started earlier than he expected. Robert had woken to the taste of metal in his mouth, a dull ache deep in his bones, and a faint, bitter knowledge that this wasn't a bad day. It was the start of the final stretch. The doctors had warned him about rapid decline. They'd been clinical about it, like reading the forecast for a storm he couldn't avoid. But Robert didn't slow down. Not now. Each morning, he found himself at Martha and Lily's door, the cold air biting at his face, the same chipped brick steps under his polished shoes. At first, Lily greeted him like a novelty, the way children greet a guest who might bring sweets. But soon, she stopped asking why he was there. She simply expected him. They settled into a ritual. She would show him her latest drawing. This one's Chester riding a rocket ship, and he would tell her a story from his business adventures, as she called them, except he wasn't talking about mergers and acquisitions anymore. He was telling her about the first time he'd sold a product he'd made with his own hands, about the way his mother used to hum while cooking, about the old baseball mitt he kept in his closet because it was the only gift his father ever gave him before disappearing. She listened like it mattered. The more time he spent with her, the more Robert noticed the things that were missing: the unopened Christmas cards on the mantle, because Martha couldn't afford stamps; the way Lily's shoes pinched her feet because they'd outgrown her before the season was over; the way the new wheelchair was actually older than she was, refurbished and squeaky. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Martha sat across from him at the small kitchen table. No cane this time, just her tired hands wrapped around a chipped mug. "You're here a lot for a man who says he's busy," she said. "I am busy," Robert replied. "Busy figuring something out?" Martha looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not asking for a savior, Mr. Mitchell, but I'm not blind either. You've got maybe a week left in you. I see it in your eyes. I've seen that look before in my husband, in my sister. Time's running out. If you're going to make a choice, make it." Her bluntness hit harder than the oncologist's diagnosis. The next morning, Robert called his attorney. "I need adoption paperwork," he said without preamble. There was a pause for a child. "Robert, that process takes. You'll make it happen," Robert interrupted. His voice left no room for discussion. "It needs to be fast. Days, not months." He didn't tell Lily right away. Instead, he visited her at the hospital during her physical therapy session. She was trying to push herself farther down the hallway without help, her arms trembling with the effort. When she saw him, she grinned, sweat beading at her temple. "You still looking?" she asked. "For what?" he said, though he already knew. She tilted her head, that conspiratorial smile creeping in. "The place where you can buy a dad." Robert's throat tightened. "I think I found one," he said. She blinked at him. "Really? Where?" He crouched down so they were eye level. "Right here." She laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but when she saw he wasn't smiling, her small hands tightened on the armrests of her wheelchair. "You mean, you?" "Yes, me," he said. "If you'll have me." The hallway went still. Even the physical therapist froze mid-step. Lily didn't speak for a long time. Then, without a word, she reached into the pocket of her dress, pulled out her small strawberry-colored purse, and pressed it into his hand. "It's all I've got," she whispered. $16.37. Robert closed his fingers around it. Sold. But what no one in that hallway knew, not the nurse, not the therapist, not even Lily, was that Robert wasn't just planning to sign papers. He was planning something far bigger. Something that would ensure Lily's life would never again depend on counting coins. Something so unexpected that when the truth came out, the hospital, the city, and the people who knew him would be left stunned. The graveyard-clothed rain had stopped hours ago, but the cemetery still smelled of wet earth and wilted flowers. Gregory Wellingham stood motionless near the marble angel that marked his daughter's grave. The overcast sky pressed down, heavy and low, like the air before a storm. The boy's words still rang in his head. "She's not dead. They took her." For a man who had built empires on logic, evidence, and ruthless decision-making, Gregory was now balanced on the knife's edge between sanity and madness. Yet the boy's trembling voice, the conviction in his eyes, those were not lies. The boy, Noah, stood a few paces behind him, his ragged hoodie soaked through, his hands deep in his pockets like he was holding onto something. He hadn't spoken since they left the mausoleum. Gregory finally turned. "Show me," Gregory said quietly. Noah hesitated. "If I do, you can't tell anyone. Not the police, not your rich friends. They'll kill her." Gregory's jaw clenched. "If you're lying." "I'm not." Noah's voice cracked. "You think I want to be here. You think I like talking to people like you. But I saw her, Mr. Wellingham. I saw her with my own eyes." Gregory stared at him for a long moment before giving a curt nod. "Then take me." They walked for nearly an hour through the old part of the city, where the buildings leaned like tired giants and the streetlights buzzed with a sickly yellow glow. Gregory's polished shoes crunched over broken glass. Noah moved like a shadow, slipping through alleys without a sound. At last, they came to the old North Well orphanage, shut down decades ago. After reports of unethical medical practices, the front gates were chained, the sign half broken, a warning from another life. "This is where they bring them," Noah whispered. "Kids nobody will miss." Gregory's heart hammered. At Lily, Noah nodded toward a boarded-up side door. "Inside. But it's not just her. There are others." The inside smelled of mold and something sharper, antiseptic, faint but fresh. Old cots were stacked against the walls, but in the center of the room, A steel trapdoor stood out against the rotting floorboards. A faint hum came from beneath. They keep the sick ones downstairs, Noah said. And sometimes they make them sick. Gregory's mind reeled. This wasn't kidnapping for ransom. This was something else, organized, clinical, deliberate. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence, a sharp, metallic clink, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps above them. Someone else was in the building. Noah's eyes widened. We have to go now. Gregory didn't move. His instincts, the same ones that had made him a billionaire, told him the truth was right here, within reach. But as the footsteps grew louder, a deep voice echoed from the doorway. Well, I was wondering when the father would come looking. The deal that can't be undone. That rain had stopped hours ago, but the air over Harrison Estate still felt charged, like the clouds above were waiting for one last reason to split apart. Inside the massive stone mansion, Gregory Wellingham sat alone in his study, the fire crackling low. His glass of scotch had gone untouched, his fingers tapping against the desk as if counting down seconds only he could hear. They'll be here any minute, came a voice from the doorway. Gregory didn't look up. It was Elias Carter, the only man he trusted, and the only one reckless enough to stand beside him now. Are you sure about this? Elias asked. If this goes wrong, we're not just dealing with them, we're dealing with everyone. Gregory finally raised his gaze. I don't care who I'm dealing with. If this is the only way to bring Lily back, I'll pay any price. They arrived at exactly midnight. The gates swung open. 3 black SUVs rolled up the driveway, engines purring like predators circling prey. From the lead vehicle stepped a tall, sharp-faced woman in a black trench coat. Her hair was silver, her eyes the kind that had seen and caused far too much death. Mr. Wellingham, she said, voice smooth and cold. I believe you have something that belongs to us. Gregory's jaw tightened. No, you have something that belongs to me. Her lips curved into something that was almost, but not quite, a smile. Then let's discuss terms. The terms in the drawing room. They sat facing each other, Gregory with Elias at his side, the woman flanked by the silent men who seemed to blend into the shadows. You were told your daughter died of sudden arrhythmia, the woman began. But you already know that was a lie. She's alive, yes, but not yours anymore. Gregory's hands curled into fists. Where is she? That, she said, leaning forward. Depends on what you're willing to give us. Elias cut in. We're not here to bargain like. Gregory raised a hand to silence him. Tell me what you want. The woman's eyes glinted in the firelight. We want everything. Your companies, your patents, your influence. You'll disappear, publicly disgraced, legally erased, financially ruined. Elias swore under his breath. That's suicide, Greg. Gregory's gaze didn't waver, and in return, the woman's smile widened. You get Lily, but I warn you, she's not the same girl you remember. The warning Gillias couldn't hold it in anymore. What do you mean she's not the same? The woman's voice lowered. You're thinking in human terms. Lily isn't entirely human now. The process we used to save her, the reason she's alive, has consequences. Gregory's pulse pounded in his ears. I don't care what she is. I'm her father. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then, with a small nod, she rose to leave. Very well. You have until dawn to decide. If you agree, the transfer begins immediately. If you refuse. She paused at the doorway, her shadow stretching long across the carpet. You'll never see her again, and if you try to find her, she will die. The glimpse of SUVs were already rumbling to life when Gregory ran to the front steps, desperate for one last question. But instead of the woman, he saw a movement in the back seat of the lead vehicle, a small face, a flash of golden hair beneath a hood. For a split second, her blue eyes locked on his, not the innocent eyes he remembered, but something sharper, hungrier. The car door closed, and she was gone. Gregory stood frozen in the rain-slicked driveway, Elias calling his name from behind him. His decision would have to come before sunrise, and for the first time, Gregory wondered not if he could save Lily, but if he should.